Hi, everyone. In the meantime, this is Carolina. I haven't been able to put my background, the picture. I don't know if you can help me.
You go on, if you go to the three dots,
Yes,
more than video effects and setting,
yes.
you click there, and then on the top backgrounds, it says add new. And if you select that, it becomes part of the little icons that are there. So
It doesn't show add more. I haven't been able to add anything at all. It doesn't give
it
me the
doesn't
option.
matter. It's okay. It's all
Okay,
right.
good. Sorry.
Everything okay? Hi, Martina.
Hi, hello, hi. We are trying to set up the live streaming, so that's why you're all in been admitted while we are not really actually ready.
I see the colleagues here. I saw the name.
Yes.
So let me check.
Hi, personal hi to my friends that are on the call. I am really now even more tense since you're here, Mohammed and Mahesh.
Yeah, the colleagues say everything is ready.
Perfect. Thank you, Lee.
I wish you a successful event.
Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
If our presenters can switch on their cameras, so at least we can see we are here, or we are getting here. Samir, welcome. I think we're missing Jala, which is maybe we make a start with just opening, welcome, and so on. Are we ready? Jack, do you know if we are ready with the live streaming?
Should I be good? I think we're good to go.
Okay, so I think I will just open the webinar. Welcome, everyone. And this is a webinar that is part of a series on planning and climate action, and is organized by ISOCARP and RTPI jointly. So I will just let you know that we are recording the event is live streamed, but also is being recorded. So just for your awareness, if you don't want to be on the recording, you unfortunately you have to leave the meeting, the webinar. So welcome everyone, and I will pass on. We have a number of really excellent speakers, so we just want to pass on quite quickly to the introduction. So Tiana, do you want to introduce from the side of ISOCARP?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Martina. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, and afternoon, wherever, whatever time zone you're in. My name is Tiana Tufek-Mamišević. I'm a board and scientific committee member of ISOCARP, which is the International Society of City and Region Planners. I'm also a sustainable urban development expert, and I work as adjunct professor at DePaul University in Chicago. So for those who don't know, ISOCARP is a global network of urban and regional planners, as well as allied professionals, that was founded 60 years ago and is committed to promoting excellence in planning through knowledge exchange and collaboration. And one of these key initiatives of ISOCARP are webinars like this, such as the Agora, which serve as a digital platform that enables professionals worldwide across continents to engage in dynamic dialogue and discussion about the future of our cities. I would also like to announce that our webinar today is live streamed through two platforms, the Guojiang Cheng and the Blibli platform in China. So many thanks to anyone who is tuning in. And I also believe that today's session on regional planning for resilient natural systems is particularly timely as climate change accelerates, and we must rethink how natural systems from fast-eroding coastlines to peri-urban greenbelts, how they really interact with urban growth. Resilience planning on a large integrated scale is essential, and I truly hope that today's discussion will challenge us to think not only about protecting natural systems, but also about leveraging them as active components in shaping sustainable cities. I encourage us to think not only about the environmental imperatives, but also the cultural and societal value that these systems hold. I really look forward to an insightful webinar and thought-provoking discussion. And with that, I will pass the word to our esteemed partner from RTPI.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. My name is Beatrice Crabb. I'm a chartered planner and the international manager at the Royal Town Planning Institute. For those who don't know the Institute, we are an international professional body for planners with over 27,000 members worldwide. As an institute, we are committed to advancing the art and science of planning and to work towards the long-term common good and well-being of current and future generations. Urgency around the climate crisis is at the forefront of everyone's mind, and planners, together with other built environment professionals, have a key contribution to make in addressing this global challenge, lead on climate action, and build a more sustainable world. We're therefore very pleased to collaborate with ISOCARP on this event, focusing on the intersection between planning and climate resilience. This event, has been mentioned before, is the first in a series and is part of an initiative that we are supporting around climate resilience planning. So I let me also thank ISOCARP for hosting this webinar, and for our members for supporting this initiative. And it is my personal hope that this collaboration will provide a platform for learning and exchange of ideas to support and encourage planners to lead on climate action and influence better outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. Can I just now invite Samir to give the first presentation? Samir is one of those persons that have infinite resource and time and, I don't know, energy to do all sorts of things. He is a professor at the University of Kent, adjunct professor at Imperial College in the UK, but he's also technical director of Arcadis. He's also a sustainability advisor for local government, an expert of urban resilience. He has been an activist and politician, or activist in the sense that he resigned from his political role on moral grounds, and a member and a board member of a number of organizations. So he has worked with cities, with both at the professional level, at the technical level, but also with politicians, and in his role as associate director of the Rockefeller Foundation. So he will take us to Amman, as far as I understand, and in Jordan, and talk about the challenges of building resilience there and working with technical staff and politicians over there. So over to you, Samir.
Lovely. Thank you, Martina. Sorry, apologies. I was waiting for my mic to allow me to unmute. I'm not able to share still. If someone can give me the ability to share, I've got a few slides that I can share. And while we wait for that, Martina, I did resign from a political party on moral grounds. I still am a city council member. So funny enough,
okay.
I just came off an RTPI webinar on politicians in planning, which is always an interesting topic. And what I'd add, I think, to what Beatrice said, and I'll say this all as a trustee of the RTPI and chair of the International Committee, I think both Beatrice and I are really pleased with the growing collaboration with ISOCARP, and obviously we want to take it to the next level, whatever that next level is. But thanks to you, to Tiana and the team at ISOCARP. Right. While I said that, I think this has allowed me to share slides. So let me try and do that. Okay. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Excellent. Perfect. We have gone through this, so I will skip through this first bit and give you a view of Amman. I don't know how many people here are from the Middle East or have been to the Middle East. This time actually is a very interesting time to go to the Middle East if you can, if you're allowed. But we did spend a month in Amman over the summer, and again, it's as interesting as ever, both in terms of the politics and the geopolitics and the planning and everything. So what I wanted to do is take you through, other than my beautiful pictures of Amman, is to take you through a piece of work which, as Martina mentioned, and every time I say this, you wonder how quickly.
Samir, we don't see the bottom of your slides. We see
okay.
all of the.
Let me.
We just see all of the commands of the PDFs, but not the full slide.
Okay, let me. I should be able to. What I might do. Let me just stop sharing, and I'll fix it. And then I think you're right. I just need to fix the view on this thing. Okay, let me go back. Is that better? So if I go here, oh, why is it, sorry, apologies, I don't know why it's doing that. I don't have it on a PowerPoint on this machine, so I'm just going to have to fix the PDF.
Just try again and maybe either making it just simply smaller.
Yeah, every time I jump from one slide to the other, it jumps to a full set of slides view, and I don't know why it's doing that. I am going to close the PDF and open it again. Bear with me. Okay. Are you seeing the one slide at the moment?
Yes, we are, Summer, but maybe if you can just zoom out on the button, right?
Yeah, you see, I think some of those slides are bigger than others. That's why it's.
Okay.
I'm just going to go to number 3, and I think once I set it on number 3, it will be fine.
Thank you.
Summer, could you try to press the button in the upper right corner just under the closing? There's a 4 small. This
It's
one?
the full screen.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the full screen, but it's not working. I think this should be fine. I think the 2 pictures were way too big when I inserted them. Right. Hopefully you can see this full slide. So a man went. So a bit of a quick story here. So the Rockefeller Foundation in 2014, in celebrating its centenary, set up a fund of initially $100 million US dollars, and that went up over the following 2 or 3 years to $150 million US dollars. But they set up this network called 100 Resilient Cities with that 100 million commitment. And the idea was each city was going to get $1 million. Now, cities got really excited, because if you run a town hall and you think, oh, we're going to get $1 million in cash, you get excited and you apply. As it stood, the cities were not getting $100 million in cash. What they were getting was technical support and the ability to access a catalog of services from a vast number of providers in order to help them deliver a resilience strategy by embarking on a resilience journey. And Amman was one of the early cities that applied. Cities were recruited in 3 phases, and I joined a couple of years after that. And while I was looking after Amman, I was looking after Ramallah, Milan, and Rome, and Barcelona, and Tbilisi, and Lisbon, and Byblos in Lebanon. I always forget one. So it's 8 in total. And the journeys were running concurrently. In addition to those 8, there were another 92 going through similar journeys. Amman's problems, and one of the reasons why under a previous mayor, and obviously mayoral interest and mayoral ability to engage with a global agenda was a key driver for the city's application to the network. The mayor recognized that Amman had a couple of problems in his mind that needed urgent attention because they were impacting the ability of the city to be resilient, i.e., look after its residents and deliver all of the needs of its residents. the definition of resilience, which the foundation used, which was, again, interesting because cities had to commit to that, was that it effectively harnessed the abilities of cities and their governments and their communities and their institutions in order to survive, adapt, and grow. And more recently, the word thrive has been added to those, so that the cities are then able to recover no matter what acute shocks, earthquakes, waves of refugees come their way, or any of their chronic stresses. And chronic stresses in cities tend to be very similar. It could be air pollution, it could be traffic, it could be congestion, and so on. Amman was growing very rapidly. And in this slide, which is again taken from the work we did back then, so the city was 4.5 million people. The city is now close to probably 5.5 million people. So it's another million added in the space of 7 years. The city's population is young. The population pyramid effectively favors the young, which means that population increase, not necessarily urban growth, is going to be quite substantial over the next few years. And that's the next bit. So there's in some circles, and again, obviously this depends on geopolitics, further waves of migrants and migration, for example, the population is expected to grow by a further 50% in the next 35 years, taking the total to 6.5 million. Now, that is approximately 50% of the population of Jordan, but it is also 70 to 80% of the country's GDP. So the gross value add that Amman provides to the Jordanian economy is immense, and it's much more than its size compared to other cities within Jordan. So these are some of the challenges that, in the mind of, like I said, a previous mayor, drove the application to the Resilient Cities Network. And the network asked for really specific things of cities. They asked for a mayoral commitment, they asked for a government commitment to support mayors, but also it asked cities to take on board chief resilience officers, which the foundation was then funding. And in Amman, the city manager became the chief resilience officer, and that was a model adopted in a number of places. Some cities run an open competition, like Milan, for example. We interviewed separately for a chief resilient officer, but that took a bit of time. Amman only had one mayoral transition while all of this work was going on. So the strategy was started and conceived and developed under one mayor, but then it was published under another mayor. And obviously, we needed that mayoral support in order, and that commitment in order to continue the work. And that was part of the brief that we had, i.e. go to Amman, talk to the mayor, make sure that the mayor is on board before we do anything else. And the same thing happened in Rome, for example. At some point it was Virginia Raggi, for example, it was her predecessor and so on. So these mayoral transitions were normal. The same in Tbilisi. We had Mayor David Narmania, and then we had Mayor Kaha Kaladze. So these were normal things. You know, we'd go and speak to the mayor and make sure that the commitment is there. Amman's journey itself, like I said, started in 2014. The strategy was launched in March 2017, and the mayor changed in February 2017. So, you know, literally a month before the strategy was launched, that mayoral transition happened. The process itself has a number of key parts which are critical to the process of drafting a resilience journey and delivering a resilience strategy. And I'll talk in a minute about the Green City Action Plans, which Amman also tried to deliver, and they also run alongside a set process. So appointing a chief resilient officer, running a preliminary resilience assessment, identify some of the challenges, run a particular diagnostic on a specific area. In Amman, we looked at waste management because they had a serious issue with waste collection given the rapid increase in population, and then kind of begin to deliver some thoughts and ideas into what the focus for Amman should be. And that focus was effectively built on if I show you this, and hopefully some of you have seen it. If you haven't, I thought it's useful to have, because this is the lens that is used to assess a city's resilience journey, and it's the City Resilience Framework, which was developed by ARAP as a result of a commission by the Rockefeller Foundation. So very much part of that journey. It has 12 drivers on the outside, and on the inner ring, it has the 4 areas that are critical to those 12 drivers: leadership and strategy, health and well-being, economy and society, and infrastructure and environment. And effectively, the perceptions assessment that we then did, effectively took those areas and then ran a series of mapping exercise to try and identify, as part of that preliminary resilience assessment, where the city needs to act and what are those areas of vulnerability that are absolutely critical. And in Amman, you could see, and it's that particular arm that has the red and the kind of ambery lime color, that effectively said natural environment and natural assets effectively is one of those areas where Amman needs to do better. Now, it needs to do better at integrated regional planning, absolutely, but nature assets and the natural environment was one of those areas identified as critical. We then went on to develop a vision, and because of the population profile of the city, and because the number of Syrian refugees coming into the city was becoming an issue in policy circle in terms of how do you deliver and cater. Remember, this is 2014, 15, 16, and 17. So the vision was a welcoming, young, and a diverse city, balancing the old and the new, progressive and traditional, just reflecting some of the tensions, and then a culture of sharing and inclusivity, pioneering regional change. And we had to get the mayoral support for this, so both the old mayor and the new mayor. And the new mayor was a bit hesitant at first. You know, he'd come in, didn't know much English, got into the job, was an elected politician in one of the Amman eastern suburbs. So very different from his predecessor, but he has grown into the role in such a way that he now, you know, at some point he was on the board of C40. He's part of the Mayor Migration Council, which is one of the spin-offs of our work in Amman with the International Rescue Committee. So mayors change and adapt in the same way cities do, but we had to sell a vision. And it was absolutely critical that the mayor bought into that vision. So, and that vision had 5 key pillars. One, that an integrated and smart city. Everybody in the Middle East wants their city to be smart, and everybody thinks their city is the smartest than anybody else. But you know, it was there as a strategy. An environmentally proactive city, because remember, the environment was identified as a key area of intervention in the preliminary resilience assessment. An innovative and prosperous city, a young and equal city, and then a united and proud city. So those 4 and 5 were more on the social resilience pillar. And then the other 3 were more on the infrastructure, and that includes nature, environment, and the built environment as well, and some of the city's basic infrastructure from waste collection through to transport. So that's how that resilience strategy was structured. This is a very
You have only a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So no, you have only a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, nearly done, Martina. And this one, and I'm happy to share this, but it's actually available on the city's resilience strategy. It's a diagram that effectively shows all of the areas of intervention. So the 5 pillars I've just mentioned, the 16 goals that sit under them, the 53 actions that then sit under the goals, how these map onto the SDGs, so you can see that in the column on the right before the end, and then the resilience value mapped along across the framework. And this diagram is available on a large spread in the city resilience strategy. Key here is the need to develop a green city action plan, which is what then followed as part of Amman's submission to the EBRD, the European Bank for Infrastructure and Development. And it followed a similar process. So the GCAP, the Green City Action Plan, had a level of data collection element, a vision and objective element, and then tangible bankable project. The word bankable project kind of kept on popping up in the same way as the resilience strategy. And Amman joined a number of cities in this process, like Istanbul, like Batumi in Georgia as well, all doing the same thing around the same time with more or less the same number of consultants. Bureau happened, I think, because her voice on the call, they were doing work in Beirut, for example, at some point as well. And these are the areas that were looked at, really key challenges around infrastructure and both its resilience and the investment needed in order to deliver space for nature within the city. And the process was very similar. You can see it's very repetitive. So what I'm trying to get to you here is cities have strategies, they've gone through process, they've had conversations, they've outlined bankable projects, and we're still not taking cities as far forward as we should. And that's probably something for us to reflect on here. Martina, I'm happy to stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Samir. That's been really interesting, and I'm sure we have further questions, particularly on the Green City Action Plan and how it plays out a few years down the line. I would like now to introduce Jala Makhzoumi. If you can switch on your camera and come to the front. Jala is a landscape architect with a very mixed background, Kurdish, Lebanese, Iraqi family ties, so parts very much of sort of like international components of the whole of that region. She's also an academic, very renowned, prize-winning, but also the vice president of IFLA and the president of the Middle Eastern chapter of IFLA, that is the International Federation of Landscape Architects. She's also a practitioner, and despite being a landscape architect for us planners, she's the one that has taught me the most about green spaces and landscape and how it fits or doesn't fit or how it should fit with planning. And really also the meaning and role of green spaces and natural spaces in the Middle East, spaces that are fragile but very resilient at the same time. So Jala, I'll just hand over to you. You can share your screen, and you're very welcome to make a start. You have about 10 minutes.
Thank you, Martina. Let me just figure out sharing.
Yes, you're now sharing your desktop.
Can you see my PowerPoint presentation? Excellent. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Martina, for that lovely introduction. And good afternoon, all. A pleasure to be taking part in this ISOCARP Cyber Agora. I will talk, as Martina said, from the landscape point of view, a landscape professional point of view, and I'll talk about resilience. And I'm very happy to have a lot of the points raised by Samir I will touch upon, but it'll be mostly a focus on actual strategies and tangible plannings. First, a small reminder. Resilience, really, that we use so much, comes from ecology, and it's ecologies that describe natural systems, giving them the attribute of resilience. Nature is resilient, and there is a very big overlap between resilience and between sustainability. Natural landscapes, as you can see in the top left, are resilient, and then we lose this resilience or self-sustaining. Resilience, in essence, is the ability of a system to bounce back when impacted. And nature and semi-natural systems have that ability. For a landscape architect, resilience really means, in the context of a city and city planning, resilience implies protecting, restoring, restructuring, reclaiming natural ecosystems and natural processes in a city. Why? For 3 reasons, and this is what I wanted to focus on today. There are many more reasons, but these are the key that return to today's discussion. Water, because protecting natural ecosystems allows us to better manage water. Climate, improved urban microclimate, and enhanced biodiversity. I will start with, I'm going to discuss 2 case studies because we have very little time so that we have more time for the discussion. I'll start with the first project, the Erbil Green Belt, and it's a project with Khatib and Alami in Lebanon that were commissioned to do the master plan for the Erbil Green Belt proposed by the master. Erbil is the capital of the Kurdish region in Iraq, and it's one of the oldest continually inhabited settlements. And so the Green Belt was really there to protect the city in a way as an amenity landscape. This was the conception. It's a very, very rich landscape. Now we're looking at urban peripheries. You can see in gray in the middle of this web of waterways from the GIS mapping. You have the urban footprint and some scattered settlements, satellite settlements, and it is a landscape that is rain-fed farming, a lot of water courses, and 23 villages and pastoral lands. This is not unusual. It is quite typical of the upper northern Middle East. The problem is that the local authorities' conception of the green belt was outdated and narrow. For them, a green belt is expropriating the lands, evacuating the villages, 23 villages, population, and just reforesting the site with forest trees, which is quite problematic in terms of resilience, especially. So the alternative vision that we propose is mainly to have people at the center and their livelihoods as a key driver for the strategies that we proposed, to diversify the economy, to bring in nature conservation, and so on. So, and you can see it's people-centered, multifunctional landscape. Why am I going back? Okay, so this is more or less the layered conception of the master plan with 4 key components: water courses that we converted to greenways, pastoral lands, protecting biodiversity, agricultural and agribusiness to focus on livelihoods, and the ring road, which, as you can see, is quite a thin circle, is the amenity landscape. The agriculture is really very interesting because our team was interdisciplinary. We had agriculturalists, ecologists, and hydrologists. So for the agriculture, we looked to the variations in the zones, and the numbers that you can see are really the different strategies for each zone. So we had different zones with agri-products, fruit trees, and branding of the products, and so on. So it was very much driven by this agriculture. For nature conservation, we looked at, for nature conservation, we looked at protecting the northern and the southern main water courses, both to manage water better and more sustainably, to protect the watershed, but also as an amenity and a green corridor that was integrated into the green belt. And this is a place for protecting biodiversity, fauna and floral biodiversity. A third strategy was shelter belts, cadastral and village shelter belts, and perennializing agriculture, so that we had fruit trees defining these shelter belts so that they are of benefit, and of course, species that required very little care. And finally, the amenity landscape, and this was what the client wanted mainly. but the other scale. This is a very simple table showing how in this approach, in this comprehensive approach, to work for resilience, for each one of the components of the landscape, the village, pastoral, the forested lands, the agriculture, we had an overlap of socioeconomic value, heritage value, ecological and environmental value. And these are really the corners of sustainability. So this is for the Erbil Green Belt. For the Damascus Master Plan 2030, and Martina was leading the planning team. Again, it was with Khatib and Alami, and it was a multidisciplinary team. Again, once more, the conception of nature in the city, around the city, for the client was very limited. This is nature. These are the nature. It's small pockets of parks and road verges, cemeteries, and sports grounds. However, they failed to realize that these pockets of nature are okay, maybe for the city at one scale, but when the city expands at the metropolitan scale, it is impossible. These will not represent nature, nor will they contribute to resilience, as we spoke earlier. So we look to another, as I was researching, I realized there were 3 key components that defined Damascus that were not even included in the agenda of landscape. And these are Mount Qaisyoun, a landmark mountain overtowering Damascus, the Barada River, that was the structure upon which the Islamic city and medieval city was built with its hammams and its mosques and neighborhoods, and the Ghouta, the green mantle you see in the aerial that encircles Damascus with productive agricultural lands. So I proposed these to the client, and they were, of course, very happy because they love these components. They know them. They just don't think of them. They don't think of their potential. So I will very briefly, again, very quickly go through each one of these. The Ghouta is, again, under threat. First of all, by urban encroachment, illegal settlement. So this was one of the tasks we did, to determine what was the scale of encroachment and how to protect it. The second threat was water. There was a scarcity of water. In the Middle East, water is increasingly becoming scarce. And so for agriculture, there was very little water. So we looked to developing alternative agricultural regimes. And this is very quickly one of the concepts that was proposed by ecological zoning to change the configuration of the Ghouta, to keep it as a productive land, but to have the largest share of non-irrigated landscapes, pastoral lands, and then agriculture, or really perennialize, again, agriculture with non-water requiring trees, and then have a band of green and amenity periphery, because you have to also keep in mind another challenge is that these are private lands. So you can't have people going in them. I mean, their effect as nature pockets is there, but you cannot use them. Another was the Barada. Again, the problem is that they are tapping the water at source in the Fiji springs, and so there's very little water left in the 7 Barada tributaries that home the city. However, the space is there, and so our idea was to develop these as green corridors, to reintroduce, use tertiary water just to pump water back into them. But even without the water, they are promenades and they have the potential to work as such. So in short, a brief view of the master plan proposed with the planning group, with Martina leading. So what we have is inner, lighter green, inner Ghouta, pockets, outer Ghouta pockets, the Barada River, and Mount Kasyoun. As you can see, Mount Kasyoun was declared the Mount Kasyoun as a protected landscape of non-irrigated landscape. So in a sense, you really reclaimed nature for Damascus through these components. But in addition, I mean, we're talking only about resilience, but it is also the character of Damascus, and you don't want that to erode. So it is that. And of course, the most important part of reintroducing nature is really accessibility. In the inset is accessibility for people of those small pockets, the municipal parks and the road verges and so on. In the main master plan, you can see that nature has become accessible through metropolitan Damascus and not just Damascus itself, the inner city. So I will conclude with 3 points. The first point is we have to look to ecological continuities. The lesson of landscape really is that there are no administrative or municipal boundaries. We have to look beyond these boundaries, because in both cases you saw, we went outside the city to bring in nature systems and reclaim nature. The second point is none of these cases was framed as climate resilience. Nobody was interested in climate. They were framed as heritage. And the important thing is that they were strategies developed through ecological landscape planning. And these look to place the potentials and limitation of place and work to recycle natural components. And this is why they are sustainable and resilient. Finally, the problems of ecological changes at the global scale is way too complicated for one discipline to tackle. We have to look to a collaboration of disciplines. And this is at the heart of IFLA's signing a memorandum of understanding with agencies as well as ISOCARP, you can see up there, UN Habitat, UNESCO, IUCN, and only then can we address the huge challenge of global climate change. Thank you. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Jala. Thank you, and Samir as well. So now, after these two presentations, I would like to invite all of the other panelists. So Jala and Samir, please put your camera on again, but also all of our other speakers, please. And I would like you to introduce yourselves. So maybe Harvoy, you start, since you came up on the screen first, and then Carolina, and sort of just introduce yourself one by one, and then I will ask you a few questions. So Harvoy, go first.
Thank you, Martina. So, by all means, call me Harvoy, it makes life easier. I lead what we call planning for Barabald in the Middle East, and I took the liberty to change my background picture slightly to represent where I'm coming from, where I'm talking to you from right now, actually, because I'm speaking to you from Abu Dhabi, where we are actually quite blessed with a natural ecosystem that could provide the city great resilience that, however, I think is not necessarily seen in the way that it could function in that role as well. Thank you.
Carolina?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Carolina Figueroa. I am Colombian. I live in Bogota. I am the director of Selvar. Selvar is a think and do tank, and we work on nature-based solutions in cities. We focus on that. And I just wanted to say that, first, thank you to Martina for inviting me. And second, it's a pleasure to be with all of you and to be part of this conversation. I really don't have very often the opportunity to share with people from the Middle East, although I will publish a book where I have two contributions from two women, one from Lebanon and the other one from Jordan, I will be talking about later. But yeah, I'm very excited to be here and to listening to you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go next. So yeah, hi, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning from wherever you're all joining. My name is Saurav Kumar Biswas. I'm the director and co-founder of Sponge Collaborative. We are a company based in India that focuses and specializes in the design, planning, and implementation of nature-based solutions in the context of South Asian and Central Asian countries as of now. I'm trained as a landscape architect, but gradually moved towards urban planning and international development before founding the company. Thank you.
Thank you all. And before we start, so what we're going to do now, I will ask a few questions to the panelists, but then if you want to either type your question into the chat or into the Q&A sessions, and we will be monitoring that, and we'll invite you to ask your question directly at that point. So, but before we do that, I would like to invite Carolina to say a few words about the book that is launching next week. But your screen, Carolina, are you there? Because I can see you frozen. I don't know.
I'm here.
You're there. Okay, excellent. So I'll share this. I'll share the image you sent me.
Yeah.
There you go. And
thank you, Martina. Yes, thank you. So I'm pitching this global launch that will happen next October 10th, similar time than this webinar today. So I tell you the story very briefly. 4 years ago, I wrote this book. It's a book called Integrating Nature-Based Solutions in Urban Planning, and this book was thought for Colombian cities. This happened in 2020, and during these last 4 years, we have been implementing the book in Colombian cities. We have been strengthening capacities in officials and planners in Colombia and Latin America. When I was sharing this book with colleagues from Global South cities through a project that I was working in, people were very interested, and they started asking me if this book was available in English, and it wasn't. So 1 year ago, I started with this idea of translating the book, and today this book is a reality, but it became a collective effort. So I have invited authors from 11 countries. We have 21 authors from the Global South. We have Latin America, Africa, Middle East, and India represented in the book. We feature 18 cities. And what you will find in this book is first a practical step-by-step approach to spreading NBS or nature-based solutions in cities. We have case studies and reflections from practitioners from the Global South to inspire and reflect on how we make things happen, how we navigate complexity and diversity. And also it's a book from the South to the South. So, and I think there's many things that unite us, but one of them is the complexity and the chaotic governance systems that we have. So I really invite you to join our launch. There will be we'll have a conversation with the guest authors, and hopefully we inspire other people to implement more nature-based solutions and to strengthen the resilience in our system, in our cities. And just one more thing, we will have an interactive session during COP16 in Cali on the 26th of October. So if you're going to the COP, I will be there as well. Thank you, Martina.
Thank you. Thanks. I'll stop sharing. And there is the link to the launch is in the chat if you need. So let me just ask the first question then, and I will ask it to Saurav and Hervoy first, and then maybe Jala next. So Jala talked about the complexity, or sometimes in planning, in a local plan, the green spaces or natural spaces are just one color. And instead, Jala showed layering and different purposes and different uses and different layers. Also, those layers have also different values. In some cases, is a recreational value. In other cases, she was showing agriculture and productive landscapes. So also maybe the monetary value is different from one to the other. In India and in the Middle East, or from your experience as practitioners, what do you think? How can we be clever as planners in trying to put this layering and this nuancing and complexity and value to our nature spaces that could be green or brown or could be desert, particularly for people working in desert countries, maybe the desert is undervalued as a natural resource. So maybe Surab first and Avoid next.
Yeah. So currently, I worked in many different contexts and cities, but currently our work is focused on places that are quite wet during the monsoons and almost running out of water during the summers. And some of that can be attributed to climate change, but most of it can be attributed to the fact that the cities grew at an incredible rate, almost always at the expense of green and blue systems that were historically appreciated and then in the middle underappreciated. And now, as a result of that loss, we are experiencing greater flooding. We are experiencing reduced aquifer recharge, and as a result, more droughts. And our summers are hotter than ever, and even some moderately cool cities in India are now facing record temperatures because a lot of roads and expansion also happen at the expense of trees. And so now we are beginning to find value in open space as infrastructure, where even now many cities are realizing and kind of jumping on this idea of the sponge city that China pioneered, but it's basically based on a very simple idea that if we as a city or as any built environment respected and understood the way water moves through the landscape, or the way that ecosystems improve quality of life and provide all these ecosystem services that cities rely on, then we wouldn't be in this mess. And now nature-based solutions offers an interesting pathway to achieve climate resilience. The challenge always is, as Carolina's book might discuss and Jala and all of us face when practicing there, is how much room do you currently have in the city, and what are the processes by which land use conversion can be reformed so whatever is left in the peripheries in terms of wetlands and farmlands and forests can actually be preserved. And I think that's where planning plays a great role at the metropolitan scale, and design plays a very valuable role in getting creative about how open spaces can be multifunctional and how we can layer infrastructure, how we can work with urban soil. And that's kind of what we are doing, working at both scales simultaneously, where we develop a metropolitan open space framework, we develop neighborhood level feasibility studies, and then do pilot sites to demonstrate what would happen if we designed a sponge park that's layered with activities and it's designed to flood when there's an extreme event, and then the water goes away into the aquifer and it's a park again. So I see a very valuable role now for designers and planners to bring back nature into the city.
Thank you so much. Avoid?
Yeah, I think that the most interesting word that you used in the introduction there was, to me, it's just value, right? And I think Surab talked about forests, he talked about agricultural land, and I think that this is where the Gulf, and I want to differentiate here a little bit in the Middle East between the Gulf and the Middle East at large, because I think that we obviously have a very, very different environment, right? And Damascus is a very different city to for example, Abu Dhabi in terms of its natural environment. And the point around, although I've got this nice picture of a lot of greenery here, it's not necessarily a productive landscape in the classical sense. And I think that this is one of the key issues around how do we actually start thinking about the value of nature and the value of larger natural systems, and how they contribute to the well-being of cities, their abilities to withstand shocks, stresses, right? I think that whilst I believe we're also getting hotter, our cities, we're a lot more attuned to that, and we're not necessarily coping better. We just have the systems in place to help us survive sometimes very challenging temperatures. I think that what is really interesting is Saurav talked about sponge cities, right? We probably, a lot of people remember that the images that came out of Dubai from earlier in the year, where the climate change that we're experiencing is surprisingly causing flooding as a major issue in the cities of the GCC, and I believe that there's a lot of lessons learned, or lessons to be relearned in the way that we then start using planning and the way that we allow our cities to grow. Because I believe, coming back to the point around value, in the simplest of equations, a piece of desert doesn't have value until you put infrastructure in it and a road to it, and then you can sell it as real estate. And I believe that when you are only seeing it that way, you're probably not, you don't have the history of understanding what the natural environment is providing. I think that, the leisure activity that is understood, there's lots of people that are native to the desert have an affinity to spending time in the outdoors. However, the lessons, for example, and I'll be very interested to hear more from other global south cities, because I think that whilst the environment is different, some of the governances and some of the way that you make the case for investments in those spaces, that's probably not very different from the GCC to much of the other global south.
Jala, do you want to comment just very briefly, because I want to ask Samir something that links what was said by others.
I agree that at the heart we have to look to what nature is. This is why I said recognizes exactly in Dubai and in the Emirates. I love the wetland areas they have made, reviving the mangroves. So each part has a different nature, and in a sense, the problem is that in many parts of the global south, we are so obsessed with the northern globe nature, so that green parks, and it doesn't have to be a park. It could be a wetland, it could be a mountain, and like Kasyoun, which has no plants on it, but it has a significance historically. So I think this is important. The second point I'd like to make is multifunctionality. To make things work, we have to have different functions. I mean, as I said, if it's green and productive, so that it contributes to livelihood, not just to livelihood. In the Gulf states, they don't need it for livelihoods, but it is engaging of the community and engaging them in nature. So I think multifunctionality is another lesson from nature that would really help in developing implementable and workable strategies. Yeah, that's all, Martina. Back to you.
Thank you. It's really compelling. Samir, you started your presentation talking about the mayors and convincing mayors and the role of mayors. Then Jala said, the local authorities commissioning studies misunderstand, and we have to convince them that what they want is not a park like like you have in the UK or somewhere else. And then Saurav mentioned the infrastructure value, the sponge value, and Ervoy mentioned real estate, or open space is seen as real estate opportunity. So how do you start even working? How important is the mayor and the government, and how important it is to start with this new vision, or with a new, reframing the conversation?
Yeah, thank you, Martina. That's a very good question. So vision, I think, is the heart of that. So all of the resilience strategies we worked on had visions, and they had visions that mayors committed to, whether we're talking about the mayor of Milan, mayor of Rome, mayor of Amman, mayor of Tbilisi, all of them had visions that were worked on with their teams, and they needed to commit to it. There was a question also in the chat, did you work with other people? Yes, we worked with Metropolis, with UCLG, with IFLA, because everybody was present in those cities. So when you think of politicians, and politicians come and go, most of the time it's their officers who remain in place. So there's two pieces to that puzzle. You'd want mayors and senior officers in a city or a town to recognize the long-term benefits of nature-based solutions. At the moment, and we found that even here, so I'm sitting talking to you from the south of England, and even here, there still is a lack of understanding from policymakers and some parts of the public on the benefits and outcomes from nature-based solutions, which is why we're also beginning to talk about nature-positive solutions and trying to articulate some of the needs that cities need to get to grip with. One of the issues we also face here, and in some respect it's also absent elsewhere, is this idea of regulators. So the English regulators who regulate nature-based solutions and interventions in nature, like the Environment Agency, wildlife trusts, and they have local chapters, they're poorly resourced and poorly funded. And I think that poor resourcing, poor funding, and lack of capacity and capability is probably the same, in towns and cities all over the world. The other thing, which I think is critical, and one of the things the resilience approach we had tried to cut through, was this siloed approach to delivering infrastructure. Because again, it's everybody operates in their role vertical, and nobody likes working horizontally with other people. And that is actually killing innovation in cities in some respect. But it's easier, because that's how, officers, technical staff in cities, that's how they've been trained, within their various professions. They don't necessarily work with other professions. And when they're put in their vertical silos, unless driven horizontally to collaborate, both internally and externally, which is critical, you're asking them to think about doing large capital projects like nature-based solutions differently. But they don't find that easy. There's comfort in hard infrastructure solutions because they can cost model them, they can plan them, they can design them, they've been building them for years, they have clear benchmarks. That's not the same for nature-based solutions. So we need an evidence-based, and I think this is where Carolina's book, for example, is fantastic, because you need that evidence base and those exemplary projects that effectively then work to reinforce those long-term benefits of nature-based solutions. You can talk about the lower maintenance costs as opposed to other pieces of infrastructure. I think all of that's critical. And there was a publication by ICSI last year at COP, the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure, on examples of global nature-based solutions as well. So we are getting that body of evidence, which is critical for both, technical staff in a municipality or a town, but also more importantly, the politicians. And some politicians get it, they get it very quickly. Some politicians you need to work much harder to convince, because politicians, they're looking at a 3 or 4 year time horizon. If they don't see a win, they're not interested.
And Carolina, if I can bring you in, you talk about ecosystem services. What is meant by that? And then is that something that can be used as evidence, or does it sit in the realm of the technical world, or can feed into the political and opinion, winning over opinions?
Sure. Yes, Martina. So I think there is a missing aspect in what we have been discussing, which is the future. How are cities growing, and how this growth is disturbing or favoring the provision of ecosystem services that the city needs. So we are talking specifically, and Jala mentioned in her slide, we're talking about water, we're talking about biodiversity conservation, we are talking about food provision. So how are we ensure, what are the decisions we are making today to ensure that those benefits that we call ecosystem services, those benefits from nature are ensured for the future of the city? So I think when it comes to crisis, water crisis, we, for example, in Bogota at the moment, it has been more than 20 years that we haven't seen so close a drought that is threatening our water provision and our energy provision. So when we bring those aspects into the conversation with politicians, that's where something has to start ringing a bell. Because if we don't bring those issues that currently are creating a threat or a risk, and if we don't put them in the agenda, so it's very difficult to foresee how nature can play a role in the city now and in the future, and how those possible risks can shape the decisions we make today. So I think in that respect, bringing conversations about the future is important, and how ecosystem services are provided today and how they will be provided for the future in the city. And let me just mention a few more. When we talk about climate change, we're not only thinking about responding to floods, we're also talking about increasing climate protection. So how, for example, coastal cities with mangroves, or cities that have very close by their water provision systems, what are the strategies that we are bringing for those ecosystems that provide water to the city? Or how are we planning in a way that waterproofing all the city doesn't create more floods? So those questions are very important that we bring today for thinking about the city of the future. Over to you, Martina.
Surat, do you want to add something? And then Jala after that. As particularly also nature within the city and within the urban areas itself, you know, the role that they have, that nature has.
Yeah, I mean, one point I wanted to respond to was there's two kinds of power brokers that you have to convince to change a system. One is the politicians who have the influence to just put an agenda because they're convinced that that agenda needs to be followed. But then there are the technocrats who will continue to stay in those departments year on year, and it doesn't matter who's elected and who isn't. And we need to work on both fronts in terms of advocacy towards politicians and capacity buildings towards the technocrats. So that's the kind of model we are following. So we believe nature-based solutions are ineffective if they're not done at scale. So we have to always keep that landscape scale in mind, that even if you're in a fast-growing city, if you're in a coastal city, or an arid city, a tropical city, you have to know how to protect those systems at scale and manage your growth accordingly. It's not an easy thing to do, but definitely that. And then at the site scale, you need to keep showing new models of designing urban nature. So it keeps people excited. It gives them a vision they can relate to, but it also becomes a site to give all the benefits of nature-based solutions. And sometimes you can achieve that even without all the standards changing. Sometimes it's this very opportunistic confluence of the right actors in the right place, both from the practitioner's side and the political side and the technocratic side, that you just get a pilot, and that pilot pushes for the reform that is needed institutionally. And then once that project is done, I think it's very important to do capacity building for the engineers who could replicate at least the functions of that, of whatever nature-based solutions component is, let's say in our case, in a sponge park. So they're able to replicate it within their systems, within the parks department, even if it's a simpler version of it. or a scaled down version of it, and that they're then able to build a whole procurement contractor nexus, because that's sometimes what just keeps the status quo going. It might be more cost effective to do nature-based solutions than pouring concrete, but there's a lot less institutional inertia to pour concrete. So that's what happens. And I think we have to consider how to start reducing those costs when we do work as planners also. So to focus on the advocacy and capacity building side, I think is very important. Yeah.
To you, but I particularly wanted to ask you, I know you want to say something of your own accord, but can you also please add something? You work as a consultant, and sometimes as consultants it's very difficult. You know, we are all talking about convincing, winning hearts and minds, and advocacy, and talking to mayors, making them change their mind. And as a consultant, you're given a brief before you have any chance of doing any of that. So how can you reconcile? So that is a question. Yeah. But first, please go ahead and say what you wanted to say to start with.
I was going to say, I mean, it's a very interesting point, and that's kind of, you know, great discussion. And because I think that Samir, you touched upon that. There's like this kind of, you know, looking out towards the North Atlantic, because that's where the discipline of city making comes from, right? And I think that what Suraf is talking about, Carolina is talking about, these kinds of experiences and examples that we can lean upon and see where new things is. I mean, you know, in an ironic type of way, you talk about pouring concrete is easier. Yeah, when I see that we pour as a flood response, we've got evaporation pools instead of like thinking about using the wadis that we have for natural recharge. That isn't, you know, part of the key tools that we use when we do city planning and when we're thinking about the wider systems. Coming back to your, how do we convince people? I think, you know, fundamental is stuff like this. People need to see that there's other options out there. People need to hear that there is real value in that it's not something that is not going to be impossible to implement, because this is how these things will find their way into you know, RFPs that we respond to, and where we can then get them to do something. I mean, I've been in the Middle East, or in the GCC in that case, for 15 years. You know, well-being, quality of life, all of these things that have come up when I first arrived, and nobody talked about them. You know, nature-based solutions and flooding. When I first arrived, nobody really thought about them. Now they are actually, you know, they are actually in people's minds, and I think that might sound harsh, but you know, don't let a good crisis go to waste. You know, we need to talk about these things when they go wrong, and just say that, you know, there's not the only solution is not to increase car premiums on your car insurance, but we can actually start to influence the wider system to help us in these moments of stress, such as when we experience flooding. So I think that, you know, part of our duty, and I think that, you know, consultants, academics, politicians, whoever is in that sphere, is to kind of point out that there is a better way that we can respond to some of these issues that we're facing.
David.
Oh, thank you. Was that me, Martina?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Just again, I'll do this very quickly, but building on the conversation, and again, Suraf touched on this idea of the politician and the technocrats that sits within municipalities and town hall. And to her voice point, yes, if you're communicating with policymakers, you know, traditional engineering solutions are very easy to explain, you know, because there's so many of them over so many years. They've got, you know, and I said earlier, we know how much they cost and everything else. So, and we know what their impact is. So that evidence-based is there. What we are missing is the ability to explain a nature-based solution, you know, as you know, whatever form and shape it takes. So that evidence base is absolutely critical. But what I wanted to add to the politicians and the technocrats was the public. Because again, members of the public sometimes can be very easy or very difficult to convince. It might be easier to convince them that the absence of flooding is a result of the hard surfaces, because that's what they see, that's what they are used to see, than say in nature-based solutions. And communities generally, if you're asking them what they want to see in their area, they say, well, hard infrastructure, because they're tried, they're tested, and they're tangible. We know exactly what they're doing. So that's another piece where we need to work with communities. And again, it's educate is the wrong word, but it's more informing them of the benefits of nature-based solutions, natural flood protection, the co-creation of solutions that work for people. And I think if we begin to achieve some sort of a coalition where we can co-create solutions with politicians, and some politicians are easy to convince, some are very difficult to convince, with politicians and the technocrats who, again, need to work, they need to look outside their own teams sometimes and again, kind of break out of the silos, if you like, and then combine that with a set of solutions that build nature at its heart. I think it's absolutely critical. So I think it's the politicians, it's the technocrats, it's the public, but also it's the evidence base that we need to create change. Thank you, Martina.
Suraf?
Yeah, and to respond to your point that Martina wanted to discuss about what we do as consultants. So one of the reasons I started a company is to do, after many years of consulting, do exactly the kind of projects I wanted to do. So I positioned our firm to be a very, like we would have a chance at setting the TORs that we get to work on. And part of that is not a new playbook. It's exactly, I think, the playbook that even Konjin Yu, the person who kind of introduced the Spun City concept in China, also did, which is that he wrote letters to 50 different mayors, and I think he put it in a book. And it took him many years of advocacy to basically promote this approach. And obviously, because it's China, very different political concept. Once it got accepted, it really immediately got scaled up. In India, it's a bit different, it's a bit slower, but we also took this approach of first writing a book about the Spun City approach and how it can be relevant for the city of Chennai. And we did it in response to a crisis, which was a twin crisis, which is like it floods, and then 2 years later, there's water scarcity. So when you face a crisis like that, then everyone's looking for a solution that can resolve both. And that's when gray infrastructure value proposition falters a bit, because you build drains to flush water out and then you're not addressing water scarcity. And suddenly politicians also wanted a solution that tackles both these issues at the same time. And now with climate change, you're also getting a third issue of heat. So when you're kind of in this moment of crisis, and then you put out an idea that, oh, this is a different approach that we can take, and then you follow up that book with local level advocacy. That's how we kind of got our first few projects. And I think even now in our office, we have 10 projects, but almost more than half of them come from TORs that we have been able to influence, or stakeholders who gave us the work after we kind of convinced them of the need. But I think it was important to kind of develop a body of knowledge, take it from some other place, contextualize it to the context you want to work with, and then see. And so, yeah, we wrote the book in 2018. We started our company in 2021 when we already got some work based on that. So I think there needs to be that kind of a mix. It's not an easy model to replicate necessarily, but I think it's a necessary one. But I think in this moment of crisis, there can be many opportunities by taking that approach.
Very briefly, we are coming to the end. So, and I have one last question that I want to ask you. And if anyone has the questions, please put them in the chat now, because we are coming to an end of the session. But Jala, you go next, and then Carolina, and then I ask a question to all of you.
Yeah, I wanted to say that There's a problem in the use of green spaces. This has dominated the discourse on nature in cities. And I'd really urge that I advocate the use of the word nature, which is problematic to bureaucrats. Because it's subjective and more difficult to define and so on. But nature is so much more meaningful. I mean, when you talk about ecosystem services and you talk about the stream, it has memory, it's a heritage, it has value to the community. So really reintroducing the word nature in the public discourse on cities is a very important way to engage communities and encourage them to consider nature-based solution and looking to natural processes and nature in the city. Thank you, Martina.
Thank you, Carolina. You had your hand up a second ago.
Yes, just very briefly, I just wanted to contribute with another perspective. We're talking about convincing politicians to think about nature, think about how nature benefits the city, how those ecosystem services provided by nature are needed for the future of the city. But also there is another gap that needs to be filled or needs to be thought or needs attention, which is how to promote participation from the community and from the private sector in this process. Because of course, I mean, there's many things that are conducted and led by what policy says, what regulation says, but there's other room for people to participate in their specific spaces in the city, or how, for example, the private sector construction companies can start to implement these new ways of thinking, how nature can be part of a business model from a construction company, for example. How can sponge strategies or sustainable urban drainage system can be part of new projects that build resilience and bring nature. So we also need to have that conversation in that level. And of course, there's a big role that the public sector plays, but I think there's other responsibilities that need to be shared as well. Back to you, Martina.
Thank you. So I'll just sum up briefly the last few minutes and then ask this final question to all of you and we go around. I'll just say that for assuming that the audience of this webinar is planners or people working in the planning, and which is an assumption, of course, but I think the key messages that I've heard for us as professionals is that the role is clearly changing. We risk, if we are the technocrats, we risk to be on the wrong side of the arguments. You know, as consultants, we need to be also advocates. We need also to be opportunistic, trying to figure out the opportunities. We need to be able to work with politicians, with communities, with the private sector. It's a very varied role, and that also, I think, I would like to repeat what I said. We should not let a good crisis go to waste. I think this is one of the arguments, that the entry point seems often to be a crisis, like the Chennai one that Surav was mentioning, flood and then drought, and then that unlocked discourses that were not possible before. But also collaboration and talking to each other so that we can not only learn from each other, but also reinforce this perspective. But I would like to ask a final, nearly philosophical question. That is, should the nature and natural system be protected or expanded because we need them for microclimate, we need them for services or services to us, or we should do it because nature has a value on itself and has a right on its own, and the rights of Mother Nature are, we are guests in Mother Nature, and therefore we have a duty to respect and be subservient rather than the other way around. So I would like to hear something about the rights of nature and your thoughts about that and of nature in itself. So I'll go around the screen as it appears to me. So start with Jala, very, very briefly, because we have 3 minutes in total. So Jala, Hervoy, Surav, Samir, and Carolina last.
Okay. I think there is a problem with your question, Martina, because we are part of nature. And I think that when you protect nature, you're protecting yourself as well. It's a Western way of looking at nature, and we have to change that and realize that we are part of what we are protecting. And then it changes the way we think and the way we act and behave and so on. That's all.
It's a lovely philosophical answer to a philosophical question there. Look, let me be the designated cynic in that case. Then I think that the point about identifying the value has got more chance and actually succeeding, whichever way that we want to answer that question, whichever way we put first. I guess we can all agree that we all set to benefit from Jala's point. So I think that to me, value is identifying the values and the benefits and, you know, all this stuff. I think that probably has got more chance of it succeeding and finding its way into our toolkit.
Thank you, Surav.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I totally agree that we are part of nature, but the whole point of society was how did you manage nature? And at some point we managed nature in ways that worked for us. And soon with different ideologies, we completely worked against nature to establish that society. And now we are finding that maybe nature can offer us multiple benefits, and that's great for us. But quite literally, I think our response to the climate crisis, which we are in, because we developed against principles of nature, is just coming back to what those principles need to be. They need to be regenerative. They need to be nature positive. And that way we're able to resolve our biodiversity and climate crises. So the reason we are here is because of the relationship that society set up with how we conceive of nature and how we manage them. And now we need to figure out ways to do it smartly. Yeah. And humbly, I would say, in some ways. Yeah.
Samir.
Lovely, thank you. I'll keep this quick. So I think as a profession, and all of the professions, so not just planners, you know, surveyors, those in construction, landscape architects, engineers, structural engineers, architects, I think all of us need to become a nature and people positive professions. And only when you've got that fundamental shift in the way we teach and train planners, architects, construction to take on board, you know, these challenges and resilience and everything else that we're working with, only then will you begin to see change on the ground.
Thank you. Carolina?
So I think the question still and remains very human-centric. There are legal approaches where in countries such as Ecuador, Bolivia, even Colombia, we have designated rights for nature in our laws, in our policies, which is interesting, but I think we are very far from understanding what are the rights of nature. And let me just make you an example. In indigenous communities in the Amazon, for example, when they need to hunt, you know, the forest is the place where they get food, where they get medicine, and they get everything they need, their livelihoods for living. Traditional communities have to go through a process of asking for permission to the spirits of the forest, to the living beings that belong in the forest. And there's many times where they don't get the permission. I don't think we're even close from understanding that because we are not in that dynamic. So I like your question because it really makes us think on what are the rights of nature and what's the language of nature. And I don't think we are close from understanding that yes. So for me, it's a question that remains open, and I think there's other visions of relationships that we need to start understanding and exploring, because we are lost. I mean, in that relationship, it's not only that nature gives us things, food, and water, and so on, but there's more than that, and we have lost that connection.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very sort of like challenging last remark. I would like to invite everyone to switch on your camera so we can take a screenshot, and then thank you all very much. We have 2 minutes overrun, so quite close to time, so we've done quite well. So thank you for people uploading. I have so many windows open that I cannot take a screenshot. Can somebody take a screenshot with everyone in? Thank you very much, all of you. And we are going to have a similar, another webinar, part of this collaboration between ISOCARP and RTPI in a few months' time. So please let us know if you want to be invited or if you want to receive an invitation to the next one. Tiana, Beatrice, would you like to just make a closing remark?
Sure. I would really like to thank all the speakers for their wonderful contributions and for this insightful and thought-provoking discussion at the end. I enjoyed every moment of it, and I wish we could have more time and to continue this discussion. But all in all, I'm looking forward also to sharing the recording once it's ready with the people who were not able to attend.
Yes, I would like to add my thanks to all the speakers. Thank you for everyone who's made time to attend, and I hope you found that very interesting and stimulating. And we look forward to seeing you at our next event in a few months' time. Thank you.
And if I may say, thank you, Martina, for organizing this. And I think we've all enjoyed it, speakers and audience, and I've learned a lot. Thank you.
And I have to thank Chark for having done all of the heavy lifting of the technology, the organizations, the links, and everything else, which is the hardest part. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the day and the weekend for some of you. Okay.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.